Zero. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our SKBC Swiss Business Club panel discussion. As Korea is planning to achieve a net zero emission by 2050, how those Swiss and international companies are planning to go green. Today's team of experts and CEO will present and share their views and strategies in the current context of climate change, climate risk, and sustainability. Climate change impact on risk landscape is our today's topic. For this session, we are joined by Jonas Oldenskioeld, SwissRe Head of Korea Branch. How are you, Jonas? Good to have you.
Thank you so much, Frederic. Sorry, you caught me just when I got a little bit water before I start speaking. Sorry for that.
That's okay. We have also Karsten Kuehme, Nestle Korea President, SKBC First Vice Chairman. Good morning, good afternoon, Karsten.
Hello, good morning.
Also with us, Joseph Hill, Zephframe CEO. Hi, Joseph.
Good morning.
And they are joined by the ardent leader and tireless sustainability campaigner, Chungcha Cha, Reimagining Cities Foundation, co-founder and CTO, who will moderate the session. If you have any questions, thank you to post them on the QA windows during the session, and the question will be answered by our guests after the session. So I think we can start, Chungcha, the session.
Okay, thank you very much, Frederic, and I'm very honored to be moderating this panel of experts. I wanted to briefly set the stage of climate change and what are we doing. So just to introduce Reimagining Cities, we're a nonprofit research firm. We're going now be going beyond the research, and we're helping cities and real estate developers decarbonize the built environment. We work with existing portfolios and new construction. And we all know why, because about a third of global greenhouse gases are coming from the building sector. So to put it in a more pragmatic way, we're sharing with you one project that we're working on in Lakeview Village. It's a $6 billion mixed-use development. So this set of buildings here, it's just a rendering, but it will be roughly 100 buildings, 8,000 apartments, innovation district, labs, hotel. So what we're trying to do is design and build this project to be carbon neutral by 2040. What's very kind of romantic about it is that site was the site of this dirty coal-fired power plant, and they've now demolished it and getting ready for construction next year. Another one is Paju Innovation District. So we're taking some lessons learned from Canada and we're bringing it here. And we're very anxious to work with some companies from Europe. You guys are here in Korea, and we'd love to create a collaboration of European companies to work to help us make the showcase here in Korea. We're linking it to the race to zero. There are many European companies, especially embracing the carbon neutral by 2050 roadmap. And what we want to do is bridge those kind of investors and leaders to interesting opportunities here in Asia. And this one specifically is here in Korea. So it's the site in red. It's a little bit north of Seoul, a little bit north of Kintex, where we have the conference center. And this site is adjacent to 100,000 apartments. 80% are complete, so and occupied. So it's kind of an interesting community development that we see. And can we make this low carbon or carbon neutral development to accelerate the decarbonization of the built environment? So these are two examples, and it's right next to the GTX Rapid Rail station. So these are two examples of what we're doing in trying to decarbonize the built environment. So next I have the honor of introducing Jonas from SwissRe, and it's going to be very interesting in the way they're looking at things as to reducing the risks related to climate change. Jonas, you're on.
Thank you so much. And hopefully I can also share my screen here quickly to everyone. Can you see it like that? If I size it up even better? Perfect, thank you. I got thumbs up here as well, perfect. So good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for taking the time to listen to what we're going to speak about today. So my name is Jonas, short introduction. I am originally Swede, but worked for SwissRe my whole life. That's currently coming up to 15 years now. I worked in a couple of different locations, starting off in Zurich, then I have been to Singapore and Hong Kong, and since a year and a half, I am now in Korea. There might be some people on the call that are not completely familiar with SwissRe, even if the name sounds familiar with Switzerland and everything. So let me just cover a couple of comments on what SwissRe is doing and so on. And maybe the best way to start with is with a little bit of a story. And it's actually happened 1863 in the evening of May 10th. There was a big fire in the city of Glarus. And for you that have been visiting Switzerland, and particularly in Zurich, this is basically the end of the Lake of Zurich. It was a big fire, and there was 500 houses that was burnt down, and that left 3,000 people homeless. That was the founding moment of SwissRe, because the conclusion was that insurance companies do not diversify the risk enough. So only a couple of months later, SwissRe, a reinsurance company, was set up and has since then been operational. So what we're doing is we're helping insurance companies to diversify their risk and managing their risk. And currently we are the world's largest reinsurance companies. This always depends a little bit how you count on that. And we are operational in some 30 different countries, and we have almost 14,000 employees these days. So as an insurance company, we of course collect a lot of money, but we're also helping people to recover after events like the Glarus fire that I just spoke about. And so every year we pay around 35 billion of claims back to our clients, so they can then distribute it out to the ultimate clients that have been impacted for one or the other reasons. So that's the funding idea of SwissRe. Like everybody else, we stand in front of challenges, and there are three particular ones that we are currently targeting. One is the climate risk, which is going to be the foundation of the topic that we discussed today. The other one is the digital transformation, also a topic that a lot of people speak about, but I also trying to interact how we actually combining those things together. And then societal resilience. So how do we make the society more resilient for future crisis? So that's the introduction of SwissRe. And then the topic of sustainability. And maybe to start with, sometimes, in particular here in Korea, I've seen a lot, people speak about ESG, and then some people speak about green finance, and then people speak about sustainability. Just to make it clear how I define it, which most likely is not right, but this is the way I see it. ESG is a very concrete, measurable way of doing capital market in particular. So ESG always comes with a measurement around three different dimensions: environment, social, and governance. Sustainability is broader than that. That thinks a little bit deeper on those topics. So when I speak about sustainability, I'm not only speaking what's measurable. I speak much more about what is actually a further consideration that maybe not be measurable at this moment, or might be very difficult to measure. So therefore, I tend to use the word sustainability more than ESG. Again, as I introduce, I don't think anything is right or wrong. I just trying to explain how I define it if there are some confusion. So when we're looking around the landscape for the moment, I put two numbers on the slide here. And 70% of all catastrophes losses that happen around the world are weather related. And how an insurance company would define a catastrophe would be something with a low probability, but with high cost. So most of those are driven by weather. The other thing is, of course, earthquake, which are per definition not driven by volcanic eruption is another thing that are not driven by weather. And then, of course, you have man-made losses as well. This can be terrorist attacks or basically other disasters that are caused by human errors. or human behavior at least. So that's a big number. So if you think about our balance sheet and how much we're trying to manage, a lot of the claims that are related to before coming from weather caused reason. The other topic, if you want to put it in context, that is that we did a recent analysis where we concluded by 2050, mid this century, there might be a 10% reduction in global GDP driven by climate change. These have many different sources to drive to that number. And I said 10%, that is actually our base case. If I allow me to break that number down to what it means for Korea, you can see on the left-hand side on the slide, you can see what it means for Korea. So we did some scenario analysis where we had a base and we have a best and we have a worst case. The base case basically assume that we are able to reduce emissions of greenhouse gases according to the Paris Agreement and what people have put in plan for a moment. Even then, we can see a negative almost 10% here in Korea impact. And you see the impact is not only coming from, when people speak about climate change, you're typically thinking, oh, that means that we have water, sea level rising and we have more floodings. In Korea specifically, that is one of the main drivers. But you can also see there are other impacts from climate change going from crop to health issues to tourism that have an impact. And if we bundle these all together, we see the impact that we have stated here on the slide. So that's one to think about it. Then if you think in Korea, if you go out and do a survey, and there is a quite good survey provided on a yearly basis from the so-called PIF Institute, and they asking people, what are the largest concern you're currently having? And 86% of those asked 2020 indicated climate change as a major issue. That's interesting, even higher than the threat of nuclear from the north in the latest survey. So this just shows that people around are currently getting more and more concerning, also in Korea. From WHO, we get the other number that we stated here, and that's the premature fertility, so people dying before earlier than expected. And we see even 15,000 people doing that. Of course, this is not people that only dying from bad air. These have a long-term impact on people's health, which then make them premature. But if you look at that number, it's quite material, and you can see the social impact of that. So in Korea, what I wanted to say with this slide, sustainability and climate change is really present. So coming back to SwissRe quickly, what do we do then in order to make our part into this? And maybe starting in the bottom, what we're trying to really do is to reduce the emission rate from our operations. We have put in place that we will reduce our flight emission over the next years with 30% compared to a base year, which was 2019. So we actually start measuring not only the cost of our flights, we do that also in emission rights. And why is flight important for us? That's because we are already at 100% renewable energy. We already have to pay. So every time I purchase something, I need to pay for the carbon emission that generate. And the current rate that we're paying is $100 per ton, and we're planning to increase it to $200. And for that payment I do for my department, my cost center, we're actually buying what we call removal credit. This is actually technology that take carbon out of the air and either use it in other production or put it into the ground. But that's just our operation, our office is another thing. We're also looking through our balance sheets, what we're doing there. One side of what we're working is, of course, our investment piece. So as an insurance company, we have a relatively large investment portfolio. We're working very closely on that to address that. And then more for our core business, which is our insurance business, there we're working very actively to reduce the commitment to carbon. A concrete example of that is that as of 2030, I cannot reinsure or insure any production that creating revenue more than 30% from terminal coal. That's a concrete one on terminal coal. That is quite public one. We have other measures that we need to do. So we really try to measure and put into commitment what we want to do, and we do that publicly. So what I wanted to say with this is we are working across the value chain in order to address our carbon emission. Then, on the other hand, I started with that we also see that climate change impacting our current risk portfolio and how risk is developing. And here I wanted to make then the connection how we're working with the digital transformation that happened in the world. So we're using a lot of more sensor these days to trying to address and understand the risk created by climate change and how that really impacting our portfolio and our clients' portfolio. And one way of doing that is, for example, we're using in collaboration with Google very detailed satellite images to understand how much value sits in different parts of the world. So we dig down into the satellite images, and then we're running our scenarios of various weather-related hazards or crises, and trying to understand that, and in that better anticipate what the actual losses will be. Concretely, taking away a little bit, so 2 concrete examples what we have recently done in that regard. And the 2 examples I bring up here, one is actually supporting the transition that we're currently seeing, that you and many others are working on transition from less carbon intensive operations, and the energy sector is of course one of them. So we're currently supporting by insurance, various type of insurance, both construction, operating, and to some extent also in prediction of wind. We supporting almost wind farms and solar farms. They're generating energy. They're covering almost 300,000 households. So that's one ambition that we achieved in that regard. The other thing, as I said, we see much more climate-related losses. So the other thing what we're working on is to make sure that there are affordable insurance for those people that are exposed. So the example we're having here is on the flooding side in United States or US. 85% of the households do currently not have flood insurance, but they are exposed to flood risk. So we have worked with our partners to develop products that are affordable and can protect those clients to a certain extent, making it much more easy to recover or make it more resilient than afterwards. So these are 2 examples how we actually also then generate products out of this. If you're looking ahead, what we're working on, this graph that you see on the left-hand side actually showing the CO2 in the atmosphere also after achieving the current plans that we wanted working on. So this is globally what everybody working on, trying to reduce emission, right? And the interesting part here is the blue field. So even if all of us are achieving what we want to achieve, reducing our carbon emission, going to net zero, there will still be quite a lot of remaining carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which will have consequences. So what we need to do is actually then to reduce that and remove that carbon emission. And this is where the opportunity occurred to generate the business of that. And some of the estimates you see on the right-hand side are quite sizable. These have been also a big topic in the recent infrastructure plan by President Biden, how you can build technology that reducing carbon, and in that way reducing carbon away from the atmosphere, which then will ultimately make sure that we staying below 2% of temperature change. And as a fellow Swede, I needed to bring in a short quote from our most famous environmentalist in Sweden, Greta Thunberg. I think we all recognize that there are problems related to climate change, and there are solutions out there. The real challenge is to get going with them. And with my final slide, I always wanted to look back what SwissRe consider this. We don't consider this as a threat per definition to our business model. Instead, we actually think it's key for us to understand climate change and to bring it into a competitive advantage for us for the future. So that is our mission statement to end with. And then I'll stop here to leave over to next speaker.
Wow, that was really great. Thank you so much. And you stayed perfectly within your 15-minute time slot. It's amazing. Next, we have Karsten from Nestle, and they're doing a lot of cool stuff in sustainability. So why don't you go right into your presentation, Karsten, and share with us.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I try to get it up so that, yeah, do you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, okay,
We
good.
can see your screen.
Okay.
It can be full screen.
Yeah, I do my best. Show taskbar. This is a different setup as usual. Wait, because it is blocked here from the.
Well, what you can do is stop share and then come back in. Yeah.
So let's see.
That's good.
Actually, it doesn't help because it shows the view. Anyway, let's do it like I did. So it does not help because it shows the screen mode. So sorry for this. And now display settings.
Here it is. Yeah.
It should be now. Can you see it?
Yes, very well.
Okay, good. Sorry for the technical, how to say, setup. So thanks, Jonas. Thanks a lot. I'm also a big fan of Greta. And she's really, how to say, she has lots of power and amazing what she achieved in a few years, right? And for all of us, right? So I'm the CEO and market head of Nestle Korea, and I'm 30 years in the business and 15 years with Nestle now, right? And since 1st of July 2018, I'm in Korea, and I'm glad to be here. So we have a big challenge in front of us, and I think who can start and lead this big challenge and attacking this challenge better than a big company like ours. So we have a group sales of 84 billion Swiss francs, 273,000 people, and we are present basically in every country. I was told even in North Korea, thanks to some smuggling or from the Russian border and Chinese border, we believe. So the thing is that we are selling brands and not projects. And I think this is what we have to keep in mind when companies talking about carbon and all the initiatives. And you see the number of brands below we're selling, and mostly local brands, but also very famous global brands. So, and Nestle decided to lead the FMCG industry and would like to play a lighthouse role. And this comes also with hefty investments over time. Billions of Swiss francs are being committed to be invested in sustainability. This also should not, impact the profitability of this company. We would like to reinvest all the efficiencies we're going to get over the years into sustainability to keep our stock price also as attractive as it is today to the investors. So, to be very precise, because we would really like to avoid the name greenwashing, because that's not what Nestle is all about. We are really working on reducing our carbon impact, and with concrete targets, and we measure it. So 20% by 2025, 50% by 2030, and net zero by 2050. This, we're doing it via planting trees to absorb, because we offshore we have still an impact. Working with farmers, I'm coming to it in the next chart. Ending deforestation, and completing to get to 100% renewable energy for all sites, and the carbon neutrality, which we would like to claim for brands like Nespresso and Perrier by 2022 and KitKat by 2025. So, and the last chart for me, for my 5 minutes, is basically to show what the challenge is. And when you look at this, 71% of all our greenhouse gas emissions, is from agriculture, and especially dairy and livestock. So we have now plenty of projects running to create dairy firms which are carbon neutral, because we have to learn it first before we can roll it out. And we started, there's lots of investment in R&D also happening from our side. And this takes time to create. Think of all the farms we are working with, millions of farms, to turn this around to carbon neutral farms and better feeding the cows and using organic fertilizer instead of artificial. So this is something we're really working with. You see that with manufacturing stands for 7.7, packaging for 12%, and supply for 8%. Those things we have under control. And by the way, the travel is very little. It has only 0.8%. So you see that that's a long journey for Nestle to go. We are committed to go there, and we hope that you're also joining us on this journey. Thanks a lot, and I'm leaving now because I hand over to Joseph, right?
Yes, that was really great, Karsten. Thank you so much. I wasn't aware how expansive your businesses are. So many brands and the supply chain of managing that, and then managing the carbon of that. It must be an extreme challenge, but you guys are, focused on it and saying we got to do this. So it's very, very inspiring to hear that. Last but not least, we have Joseph Hill. So how are you?
I'm all right, thank you.
Yeah.
I can just jump into it unless you have anything.
Yeah, please jump in.
All right, so let me share my screen. So my name is Joseph, and I'm the CEO of a small startup here in South Korea. And unlike the other two presenters so far, I'm not a big conglomerate. And what I'm trying to do is actually find a solution to some of the problems that they've mentioned. So I'll start my presentation with actually a little game. And the game that I want to play with you is called Two Truths and a Lie. And what I'm going to do is tell you two things that are true and one thing that is not, and it's your job to figure out which is which. So the first thing I'll tell you is that air conditioning as we know it will cease to exist by 2050 or even earlier, according to the United Nations. And this is for a lot of different reasons. And the second thing that I'll tell you is that air conditioning uses a lot of electricity right now, and so much more so by 2050 that it will simply be unsustainable. And the last thing that I'll tell you is that the Earth is flat. And I'm probably sure that you understand which one of these is not true, and that is the Earth is flat. The other two things are very, very true, and they're coming whether we're prepared for them or not, and we have to find a solution to this problem. And this problem exists because of this kind of concept. Most cities and countries around the world heat and cool their buildings by using a lot of inefficient and ineffective units. If you live here in South Korea, you might already know this. We use lots of these units, and they're going to be increasing at rapid numbers due to global warming and due to developing countries becoming richer and wanting first world luxuries. And this is going to be a big problem. This is why air conditioning will cease to exist as we know it by 2050. So what I'm doing at my startup is I'm trying to solve this problem, and we're doing it through a combination of software and hardware. My solution is, as you can see in the bottom right corner, a door that actually has a fan and filter unit inside the door, and it's all automated by artificial intelligence. And this is actually really important because in my next slide, I'll show you that we can actually heat and cool buildings differently. In the top left corner, you can see an image of how we plan on heating and cooling buildings. We don't have to come up with a new novel technology to heat and cool buildings. We can just use existing air conditioning. A lot of other companies are trying to come up with different solutions, and they're just not going to be viable in time because they're too far ahead of the future. They're too novel. Buildings aren't designed for them. But instead of doing that, we decided to use something that everyone has, a door, and we decided to use air conditioning existing technology more smartly. So what we're doing instead is we're heating and cooling central areas, like, for example, a hallway. And we're moving that heated or cooled air where it needs to go automatically at the most efficient and effective way possible using our AI software. And it is done by controlling the fan speed automatically in each door based on any kind of parameters like outside temperature, inside temperature, humidity, light, even thermal energy from the solar. All of this is important because we can reduce the energy used while keeping the same level of comfort, while even filtering the air and killing the coronavirus even. We can do that as well. So this is important because it reduces the amount of electricity used greatly. Because as people have mentioned earlier, there's a crisis essentially, and we need to reduce the number of greenhouse gases. And using a solution like ours and reducing the energy used from air conditioning will heavily help to kind of curb this problem and hopefully one day even start to reverse it. And we have to reduce the energy used. So basically our system can reduce the energy used by a traditional building that uses traditional HVAC by about 80% in our testing and testing from a private third-party engineering firm here in Korea. So that's a drastic sea change in how much electricity a building uses. And it's interesting that two of the other presenters here are dealing with interesting areas that are very, very needing our attention as humanity. Because, for example, Chungcha, he works with construction, and construction is one of the biggest uses of electricity and energy and power, and will grow to even larger disproportionate numbers in the future. But it's one area that a lot of people aren't actually paying attention to, or they're just apathetic because they don't think that there's any solutions. And as I mentioned before, my system can save a lot of energy, and that's one half of it. That's from more of the consumer side, but our customers would be the construction companies, and there's extra benefits for them, such as that they can join governmental certifications for being green, which can allow them to do things like build much bigger buildings, have tax benefits, have insurance benefits, and they can stay ahead of the curve because a lot of these programs that are now just kind of, they're not mandatory yet. They will become mandatory in the future as things get worse and worse. So they can kind of be ahead of the curve in that way. And they can just be better stewards to the planet. They can feel good knowing that they're actually making a change in the world. So these problems, as I mentioned, they're coming. They're coming quickly, and they're coming whether we're prepared for them or not. And my company is actually in an interesting position because we have a validated solution for the problem that I've mentioned. And we're ready to implement it, even though we're a small startup. And we hope that we can be just a part of the catalyst that will help the world become, more sustainable. And we've got 3 people on our team. I'm just going to quickly go through this one. And you can feel free to contact me at any time. This is my information. If you go back during the video and pause it and shoot me an email. Yeah, I'm here to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Joseph. You're working on some really exciting things there. We will penalize you because you ran over the 5 minutes.
Oh, sorry.
Anyway, this is really exciting to hear 2 very large global organizations and a startup, all kind of with a shared vision of a more sustainable future. I wrote in our chat, please, as moderator, I'm like totally not prepared. So we invite the audience to ask questions in the Q&A section on the bottom of your Zoom window. And because I'm unprepared, if you don't have questions, we'll have to sit here in silence for 20 minutes.
So we have already a question from Philip Shin.
Okay.
Should the world have more nuclear power plants than less? Germany's shutting down its nuclear power plant seems to have been a mistake, resulting in more carbon emission.
Actually, Korea has been having the same situation after the Fukushima incident. And due to this, they've opened up and started building a lot more coal-fired power plants, which, I mean, if you know anything about power generation, coal power is actually extremely radioactive, and it's not filtered. It just sends radioactive ash and dust into the air. So the radioactivity that you get from a coal power plant is, I mean, orders of magnitude higher than what you would get from even living next to a nuclear power plant. So it's, in my personal opinion, that we need more nuclear power, not less. It will be the bridge that will gap until we are able to produce all of our energy sustainably through like renewables.
Anyone else like to take on that question on nuclear power plants from Philip Shin?
I mean, it's a carbon neutral power production. That's no question about that. So I tend to agree with Joseph here. Rather than building more coal power plant, right? That makes no sense whatsoever. Then I also think that we have reached a lot of improvement in production of other renewable sources. So it's of course a balance. And today, a nuclear plant is not really financially validated to build today. Depends, of course, how much subsidy you bring into the things, right? So it's a highly political topic. But if you want to build a nuclear today, and there are some coming on, right? China, of course, building some, but also Finland, UK, they're building new power plants as a nuclear power plant as we speak. But it's only based on significant subvention from government. Otherwise, it wouldn't fly. So I think there's an economic into this as well.
Yeah, if I may say, so I think it's important to, with what do we replace nuclear power? And the German plan is definitely to go for wind power and solar power. And we have days already quite a lot where we produce more energy from green sources than we can consume. Of course, it's not yet stabilized, so I see it the other way around. And don't forget that this nuclear stuff is with us for millions of years, and we don't know even today where to put our waste from it. So that's a big negative, but it's only my personal opinion. Yeah, it's not. It's it's a very difficult question. I think it's bigger than us here, honestly.
Yeah, I totally agree with you guys. And when someone talks about nuclear, I don't have a comment, but I always say, remember Fukushima, right? It's still a big problem. Anyway, there's an interesting question by Erwan. Is there any significant way to capture carbon that would be more efficient than putting more effort protecting natural carbon traps like forests? So, you know, we talked about reducing carbon from the atmosphere. What's out there?
I think Joseph start kind of responding to the question, and there are technologies and they're operational today, and more importantly, they're getting more and more efficient, which means the price of it coming down significantly, right? So they, of course, that is built that other people that using carbon pays for that, right? Such as the example I gave, that we paying $100 per that. And if I read a report recently, I think the estimate is that you can get it down to $40 a ton for carbon reduction. So that's quite efficient, because then, of course, if someone pay you 100 and it only costs you 40, that's a business model to me, at least. If people ask me for technology, how that is done exactly, I think there are a couple of various one, and I'm not an expert, but a problem in that whole equation is they need a lot of energy to work out, right? So they need a lot of energy, especially compact and heat the carbon out of the air. And that's one of the challenges, because it's of course getting a loop if you then at the same time generating carbon. So you need to be a little bit mindful how you set your operations up. But there are operationals already today in US in particular, and in Switzerland, by the way. There is one in Switzerland that is operational. Yeah.
I think also planting trees again is also has, if we plant the right trees at the right geographical areas where they're really growing fast, like Nestle does in Malaysia, where we committed to plant 3 million trees in the next 3 years. That also has an impact, and it's much more because you can bring forestation back. You can also mix the existing tree or forest and make it more resilient. I think there's many good stuff here, keeping people busy locally in very vulnerable areas. So I think if we, and as I was showing you, if more people would invest into reforestation, I think that would also be a big impact. Of course, not everywhere, because trees are also growing very slow in some areas of the world, like in Sweden or in Germany or in Korea. But in other parts of the world, like in South America and in Asia, they're growing really fast. So this is also an impact we can have, and it has more benefits than just carbon reduction, I would say.
Very, very interesting. I'd be really interested to learn more about that reduction technology. But, you know, as the discussion goes about carbon neutrality, climate change, it's about, so, you know, we talk a lot about the supply of energy, clean energy, nuclear plants. We're talking about, oh, we polluted, the carbon is in the air, so we have to reduce that carbon. And those are pretty interesting. What about the reduction of energy usage on the consumption side? Should we be paying more attention to that? I guess, Joseph, you're working on more efficient use of air conditioning, but, you know, we do in Asia, I saw some UN statistics where 50% of the global construction is here in Asia. And this is the rate at which we're building globally is building the size of London every month. So we're putting up tower cranes all over China, India, Korea, Southeast Asia like crazy. And the current building codes, you know, it's not enough to get to near carbon neutrality. Do you see things going on the efficiency side, like building low carbon real estate that we're interested in, but other things? Why are they allowing to sell these appliances that are so energy inefficient? Right?
I feel like there's a lot in that question, and a lot of it is maybe touchy for companies that are out to make money. But I think that we need to first start with understanding and with education. So most people, when they think about how they can help save the world, they think about electric cars, right? And they embrace this concept because they don't really have to change their lifestyle much to drive an electric car. It's very, very slightly different than what they're used to. But in terms of the other two things that are really going to be impactful for the world, one is in your wheelhouse, which is construction and building, and the other one is in Karsten's wheelhouse, which is food, how we eat and manage our food supply. These two things are areas where people are very apathetic towards it, or they don't even know that it's such a big problem because a lot of transparency isn't out there. And I feel like we need to educate first in these kind of areas, especially for construction, because people don't understand how their buildings are built and how much energy they consume, but it's one of the leading issues going into the future. So I think education is important first.
Yeah, I would like to jump on what you said on education. I think it has been also education everywhere, but also in Korea. You know, every year we have a worldwide organized event, 1 hour, the hour without electricity. And it has not really been followed by people in general, because probably it was not made with the proper maybe communication. And if you looked outside at that time, I was probably with a few neighbors switching off the light for an hour. But of course, most of the people were either unaware or didn't want to basically switch up their light for an hour. So like you said, I think it's very much about education. And of course, when you see in the consumption of electricity in Korea, I mean, when you enter a subway in summer, which is at maybe 18 degrees, and then you enter the same subway in winter and it's 40 degrees, then you see there is a real problem in power management. So yes, educating people and also maybe informing and approaching the government for these issues.
And the other way of besides education is the one that nobody wants to speak about, and that's a tax related steering of it as well, right? And it coming more and more, and a lot of corporate are taxed already, and for you that know Tesla's business model and where they get most of their positive revenue from, it is by selling carbon rights, right? Because they're reducing it and for others to buying it. So it is already becomes a market for this. if you can then also exchange that into the retail or the consumer side, that in an efficient appliance cost much more either to buy or to run, then of course you're getting other incentives into this. But what I wanted to highlight as well is the distribution. I think that is one thing that is rarely discussed, and that's basically how energy and electricity is the one that we typically think about, how efficient some of those grid networks are today, where we're losing a lot of capacity in the distribution when we're sending it from the generation to the usage, and that is a big source also to address in this, right? So I think that's another area.
Mm-hmm. I see a question in the chat box from Roger. I think it's more a question toward Nestle. What is Nestle doing with regards to exchanging protein from meat by plant-based proteins? Anything on that?
Yeah, so thanks, Roger, for the question. I get you later for this. Yeah, so no, it's a joke aside. So Nestle is trying to promote very much how to say a meatless world. So that means we have, for example, a brand is called Garden Gourmet, and which is only selling vegetarian plant-based products. So they're plant-based burgers also, for example. And we launched also a milk free of dairy in Europe. And it is the how to say, there is a business out there. It's not only that we're doing it for good, we're doing it also for business, because more and more consumers want to avoid and are how to say, afraid of eating too much meat and drinking too much milk, because this creates CO2 as we are doing farming today. And yes, we are very much interested in it, and also putting hundreds of millions of R&D resources there to create more products like this. And there's also a big market, and I fully agree, education plays a role. And as more and more people understand, and let's look into ourselves, I think 10 years ago, you were eating a steak easily. Nowadays, you think of it, at least in my environment, we think a little bit about and try to change, and getting more to flexitarians, like try to avoiding it and not eating it so much anymore.
Very interesting. Hey, as we're getting close to the hour, one question I would like to just put out there is, since we're in Korea, do you have any recommendations for Korea, for Korean companies, Korean government, as to how we could also be doing better? For me, I'm Korean American. Korea also pledged we're going to be carbon neutral by 2050. I speak to professors here and there, and in the Korean on the working level, they're scratching their head and saying, I don't know how we're going to get there, right? But it's good. The dialogue is out on the table. Is it greenwashing? Is it a reality? What can we be doing better here in Korea? Is that too difficult of a question?
No, you have to tell us who should start. I think Jonas is already trying to get there, right? So let him start, right? Talking, I guess. Then maybe we do the round. So
let him jump the cliff and see what it's end up. But so
we need Greta Thunberg here.
Exactly. I need to enforce that. Now, I think it's changing as I mean, I show one number on the survey, right? I think that there is a public opinion that is formed already that this is a problem. So I think there is awareness already out there. I think that the challenge Korea have is the speed. To be very blunt, I think Korea is a little bit behind currently in terms of implementation and actually putting policy that are actionable. A target is great to have, right? But you need to act on this as well. So I think maybe a very generic response, but don't be afraid to ask, because a lot of others have done the same journey, governments and others, and don't be afraid to ask around it and try to learn from others, because that's a good way to catch up a little bit quicker, because there are learnings through this journey, And I think that that could be a good way to do it. And I think partly that is what's happening in a couple of weeks, right, with the P4G, right? President Moon is kind of supporting and inviting others. So there are tendencies, but I will really listen to others. Take a shortcut, basically.
Oh, excellent. And I totally agree. You mentioned the Net Zero Asset Owners Alliance, and I've been speaking with some of the members there, Allianz for one, but and what they're doing is the global investors, and they are investing like assets under management in trillions of dollars, right? So one of them is telling me having a pledge carbon neutral by 2050 is good, but if you don't have a plan what you're going to do to 2025, you're greenwashing. So that's kind of the message that I'm trying to get to some of the real estate developers, to the Korean government, as to, hey, we need to work on this plan over the next 5 years. How do you bend that curve down now, right? And I think what you just said, it kind of resonates in that similar light, in that we need a plan, an implementation plan to get there, right?
Yeah, if I may add to it, me as a foreigner and knowing the Korean culture a little, I know how speedy you guys can be, right? And how fast it can change. And I think I have a big hope, because there's business out there, that the government is pushing in the right direction in the Green Deal kind of stuff. And there's in the world, there's lots of business out there. So I believe that the Korean businesses, which can be super fast in changing the way, that everybody will wake up and see there's business. So I have hopes that the Korean economy and also conglomerates are really speeding up. And if I may add also, you see ESG is getting also into their visions and missions. So I think everybody woke up. And obviously, it's on all of us to execute this fast and spearheading this trend and doing, and not greenwashing, doing it. Yeah.
Jonas said something interesting that I agree with. That Korea is a little bit behind the times. I also agree with that. However, Korea did something interesting recently. President Moon passed the Korea Green New Deal. And they did this actually even before America passed their American Green New Deal, which is still in legislation. So Korea was and is one of the kind of the first countries, first major developed countries to kind of push hard on this Green New Deal concept. But I feel like this is an actionable thing, which I agree with. I don't really like the idea of like carbon credits, for example, because that's just kind of pushing away your problems by paying money for it. I don't like this idea. I like more actionable things like what President Moon is doing. The only thing is there's not enough legislation, like Chungcha said. We need to hold people accountable, and that's the problem. I don't think there's a lot of accountability here in Korea yet, but I think we really do need it.
Very nice. Frederic, I saw you appear. It seems as if maybe, is that a sign that we're wrapping up?
No, we still have some more time, at least 5 or 10 minutes. I just came in because I realized, I mean, the camera was off. But also we get another question from Philip Shin to join Joseph's comment. A philosophical, controversial question. Isn't the kind of debate we are having happening only a rich man's problem? Do countries such as India care about carbon neutrality?
Well, I'll take a quick stab in that. And yes, they do care. They have, hopes and desires. They have 100 smart city projects all over. The problem is execution, right? They don't have enough money to deal with the problem as fast as we would like to see. Is it just a rich man's problem? Some people like to say that, but even rich people and poor people, we still got to breathe the same air, right? There are efforts for inclusiveness, more affordable housing, and all those social issues are starting to, form more of a holistic approach to building better communities around the world. And I think we're working with Urban Land Institute, and they are really pushing hard on that agenda. So is it just a rich man's problem, or I don't know. I would disagree that it's everyone's problem.
The problem is clearly global, and maybe the vulnerable are more in developing countries, because they will most likely be more impacted. At least when we looked at our numbers, they are more impacted, even if the impact of to GDP is maybe not so large, but the suffering going to be large.
Yeah.
But I think it's a rich man has a easier way of addressing, can make more impact. So therefore, it's a rich man's responsibility to address those topics more.
We have seen also, I think, a part of populations, I would say in Europe, when you increase the oil, the price oil, when you try to put reform in place, then people, of course, some part of the population who are very much price conscious and who are probably ending their months in difficulty are not also willing, I would say, to pay the bill. And it's something quite unique. So it's like you say, it's not only a rich man's problem, but everybody must be, I would say, at the same level somehow.
Yeah, if I may add, so when it comes to food, for example, we had just a presentation of the head of Walmart, yeah, the biggest retailer in the world, and he said, you know what, guys, that's don't dream. People are not going to pay for it. Yeah, most of the people cannot afford, and therefore it's on us. That means industry and retail and the retail, basically the value chain, to pay for it. So we have to find efficiencies to pay for it. The consumer will not, probably.
Yeah.
That's true. We have extra time. There is a question from, let me find it out. Okay, from Michel Martinez. We too often talk about energy generation, nuclear, coal, wind, etc. Little talk about inefficient appliance as well as building insulation. A well-insulated house will consume less energy than in summer, AC, etc. And winter heating. Any views on this?
Well, that's a topic that we hold dear in our hearts because we're focusing on new construction and existing buildings. So you're singing to the choir on that one. Problem is not many people have awareness of that. So we are working with real estate developers, having workshops and actually applying it to actual projects. So here in Korea, keep your ears and eyes open for the Paju Innovation District. And what we're thinking of doing is having, as it's being designed and developed, using that as an actual use case to have a learning series around that. And what we do even before, a German guy told me that when you develop a $2 billion mixed-use development, most people go to the architects first. He said in Germany, they like to go to the engineer first, who would give you some guidelines as to what things you want to avoid and what things to do to enhance passive design strategies or enhance energy efficiency, things like that. So we're approaching it that way on this project up in Paju.
I just read the other day that for a typical apartment building, it might cost about $1 million to use very, very efficient insulation. And that's a price that a lot of people don't want to pay because they can't pass it off to the tenants and the consumers, the end user. But I feel like
that's wrong, Joseph. If you say for insulation, $1 million, yeah. We'll have a separate conversation on that one, but
this is just what I read. I don't.
I will tell you specific things, not on what I read, but what I did, and we can have WSP or these engineering firms confirm the fact. Not $1 million per unit. No way.
But I do think that this is where a government should step in instead of giving like tax incentives and tax breaks for things that aren't really necessary. Or that aren't really helpful. I think that they should be giving tax breaks to building and construction companies to use these materials to like promote the usage of it.
Yeah. On that, what we don't like tax breaks. We don't like government money. We're trying to do a business case where we can do this without government support. And if members of the Swiss Business Council would love to do a separate one, more specific on the construction side of how do you build greener and smarter, low carbon without overspending, and link it to the investment internal rates of return. And then we'll know exactly whether it's attractive or not to be sustainable.
Yeah, we are always open for new presentation. We had the first presentation from you 2-3 years ago, so maybe we can have an update on that soon.
Yeah, well, this time I can share data on the Lakeview Village, it's a $6 billion mixed-use development. We're doing district level energy modeling and simulation on that, so we have actual numbers.
Maybe we can take a last question. I know we are a bit over time. If you don't mind, if everyone have time, last question from Erwan Villefeu. Question: we were talking about taxes. Question of taxes is important. If all people start using electric vehicles and stop smoking, that will be big loss in taxes. Are government thinking about that? And taxes or non-sustainable business should be the right direction?
I go first. No, I don't think people think about that for the moment. It's a simple answer, but as I alluded to before, like it or not, there will be other tax incentives into this, right? They call it tax, call it something else, right? But the government's financial part need to be changed accordingly. So there will be people that smoke and drive will need to pay more over time. Otherwise, that will be distributed to someone else, right? There will be a cost someone need to pick up in the end.
Yeah, in that light, I was reading, I don't know too much, but I think it was in Amsterdam, but they're picking up this notion of a donut economy. And I think they're talking more about circular economy. And some things to what you said was like, if you buy stuff at the grocery store, most people are bringing in their own eco bags and even containers to bring that home. And if they do buy products that have a carbon footprint, they would have to pay extra for that. Yeah. So it's kind of talking in terms of penalizing, whether it's tax or any other way of unsustainable life practices. I think that these taxes have to be a little bit more expensive though, right?
And I do think that we should all be confident that governments will get their money no matter what it takes. I mean, even for example, in America, they like a handful of years ago, they tried to tax soda, and people were not having it. They did not like this idea because they thought that drinking soda was their right, that they shouldn't be taxed. But like there's always something that you can tax. I don't think that that's really going to be an issue. I just think we need to tax the right thing, like tax overconsumption of energy where it's disproportionate to what the kind of baseline is. Once we establish a baseline that's responsible.
Cool. Well, I think we should be wrapping up. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you, Swiss Korea Business Council. Thank you for asking questions, Erwan and Roger and Philip Shin. Thank you for your participation.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. Great to see there are a lot of course of action to get in a better world, more sustainable world. Thanks to Chungcha. Thanks to you for moderating this session. Thanks, Jonas. Thanks, Karsten. And thanks, Joseph. Just a few words, what to take away from this. Everyone is trying to work hard to get to have a better sustainable world. Small change can make a big difference. It starts with daily small action to save energy, avoid plastic, reuse cups, saving water, reducing driving, go paperless, and so on. The list is very long, but if we start by ourselves, then there will be big change made. So thank you again for everyone joining in today. Hopefully, our next session will be offline. We will be visiting on the 12th of June the Korea Furniture Museum. Only 10 members will be allowed to join. So I will send out the invitation today, and you can join and you can register as soon as possible. End of June, an online presentation by Kelly Service on human resources. And in August, hopefully our Swiss National Day outside, and we can meet face to face, hopefully. So everyone, thank you again, and wishing you all a beautiful day and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.